I couldn't believe any of this was happening.
There were multiple visible outdoor cameras. The images that were collected were essential to the investigation.
Thirty-year-old Mandy Gordon prepares a morning of fun in the kitchen with her children.
Mandy lived in Texas with her two children, Sally and Jack, and Sam, her boyfriend.
32-year-old Sam Bird owns a roofing company. He and Mandy have been together for 9 years. He is the father of Mandy's two children.
Right. Do you want to get the ingredients? Okay, so flour and sugar first.
Mandy loved being a mom. It was her favorite thing.
Do you want to weigh it?
Mandy would bake rainbow cakes with black frosting.
I think she liked to do all these things, and she really made it a big deal. Because when she was younger, we didn't have a whole lot, so I guess she just wanted to make it better.
She was a fabulous mom.
Hi, I was wondering if I could have a welfare check on someone. The address is Lane. I think when I would do really to do this project. Searching for my daughter. Okay.
The call that came in on Thursday was initially from Ms. Debbie Gordon, and she was reporting that she was concerned about her daughter's well-being. No one had seen Mandy in at least 2 or 3 days.
She lives there. It's her boyfriend. She says she hasn't seen her for 3 days. I don't know. That sounds weird.
And so we had went out and conducted a welfare check.
I'm gonna knock on the door and see if anyone's in there. Cedar Park Police.
Hey, Sam. Sam, can you hear me? Okay. Hey, man. Hey.
Samuel Bird was in the house. He was telling the patrol officer on scene that he would not come out and speak with him. He would only talk to him through a window.
Good. So basically, we got a call asking for us to check welfare on, I don't know if it's your girlfriend or who, and her kids. Are your kids here?
Yes.
Okay. Is this one of them?
Yes.
Okay. And is the other one here?
If you look right here.
I can see one on the lap.
He also had his brother, Josiah, inside the residence with him. So there were 4 people, 2 adults and 2 children inside.
So where's your wife or your girlfriend?
Honestly, she left, and I've been texting her, I've been calling her, and she has not been responding.
Okay.
And I am frankly a little bit worried, and I don't know.
Samuel Bird was telling the patrol officer on scene that he was becoming concerned about Mandy's whereabouts.
He showed emotions of anger that she just abandoned him with these 2 children, that she just left him.
Would you be willing to allow 2 officers to just walk through your property to make sure that she's not on your property?
And I wouldn't feel comfortable with that.
The officer could see the residence as being somewhat disheveled, things turned over, things in disarray. So all of those were adding to the increasing concern about the environment. There was some potential drug use going on while the patrol officer was there.
I need to go talk to my boss in the driveway.
Next reported narcotic history at this house. I don't know if that's why we
Okay, so
in here.
I can smell marijuana.
We had a concern about the children, that we needed to secure them and get them out of that environment. We're allowed to make entry without a warrant just to secure the residence, and in this case, secure those children or get them into a safe condition.
we deployed a small unit of our SWAT team members. The SWAT team members that had made entry into the house secured the scene. They checked both outbuildings and they checked the interior.
Police! Let's see your hands! Don't move!
Mandy was not there.
There was drug paraphernalia and drugs in plain sight. So based on that, Samuel Byrd was initially taken into custody on drug charges.
Lieutenant Bond and I responded to the actual residence, the scene location, right after midnight.
Okay, what have we got?
There was an outbuilding behind the residence. It was highly concerning because there were footprints leading up to the door of the shed. And when we entered the shed, it was fresh varnish. You could smell it.
It was odd, a lot of splashes and paint on the legs of things, like it had been done very recently and very quickly.
Sam hadn't moved anything, so all the furniture was in place. He just varnished around it, which was extremely unusual. And as we continued through, we found it unusual that none of Mandy's items were at the house. In the master closet, where you would typically see one occupant's clothes on one side and the other on the other, that side was bare. There was nothing there. Really gave us question as to, okay, what has happened to her? Leading more towards, well, was Sam telling us the truth that she just left, that she packed everything up and she just left?
Whenever there's a large police presence, it generally attracts attention.
Can I talk with you?
On this occasion, we did have a man pull up and say that he knew the family.
So I think I have some information that could really help with your investigation.
What he was telling us was Josiah Byrd had been at the residence for a little while, and that he was, in his opinion, acting strange and had both talked on the phone and sent text messages to different family members that just weren't making a lot of sense.
I hope it helps.
The detectives searched for surveillance cameras that might reveal clues about Mandy's disappearance.
There were multiple visible outdoor cameras on the porch, by the door, on the side of the residence. Cameras are amazing. When we walk onto a scene and we see cameras, it's that little joyful emotion of, oh goodness, it's all captured, and we get so excited.
Inside the house, the detectives find brackets that held wall-mounted cameras until recently.
Sam had bought a pretty extensive Arlo cloud-based security system with multiple cameras. Those cameras were sitting on a table inside the main house. The magnetic balls that he would put the camera on that were attached and hanging on the wall were still there. The cameras had just been taken down.
And then there was a large box, like a DVR box, in the back of the shed. We seized all of the items we believe had stored any recorded information.
Next, detectives inspect the vehicles at the property. They find no sign of Mandy's silver Lexus.
Sam had vehicles parked in the driveway, one belonging to him for his company and one belonging to his brother Josiah. And what stuck out on Sam's vehicle was a local car wash sticker.
It means somebody has purchased a subscription, so they're able to go weekly or even daily at any time, day or night, and utilize those services.
Could be useful.
So that was an avenue to try to pinpoint locations and identify what Sam had been doing recently, and had his truck been used in anything.
Sergeant Whitley, can we look at your subscriber records, please?
The records reveal that Sam's truck arrived at the car wash shortly after 11:30 a.m. on December 11th.
Play a few minutes before the logged time.
But what we were looking for specifically was Sam, is when is the last time it was used, who was operating the vehicle, who was in the vehicle.
That's his truck.
Show the footage from the next camera.
Stop it. Third. Zoom in. That's Sam.
Sam had been at the car wash there on December 11th at approximately 11:34. That video showed us that he was by himself. Nobody else was driving his truck.
Okay, play on.
Show that again. Zoom in on his feet.
What I observed in that is that Sam had no shoes on. It was December, it's cold outside, but yet we have video of Sam at a car wash with no shoes on. Why is that? Sam's unusual and erratic behavior were causing great concern. He appeared to be disheveled, and the fact that he had no shoes on, why is that? When you said your wife has left and she's left you with these two kids, why is getting your truck washed the most important thing to you? So these were all questions that we needed answers to, and we needed to identify where had he been, what had he been doing.
His truck was quite muddy.
Zoom in on the mud.
We noticed this very distinctive red mud was both on the tires, the wheels. That kind of told us that he's at least been driving this truck off-road somewhere outside of this immediate area.
It really stuck out that that mud was not mud that we had here in Cedar Park.
Thank you. Let's go out.
Samuel Bird flatly said that he was not going to speak with us. He was not going to cooperate. However, his brother Josiah was a bit more cooperative.
He seemed to be extremely distraught and shared our concern with where Mandy was.
What's going on with Mandy?
Sam said that she left 3 days ago, and he's been dealing with the kids and full-time work.
Josiah was consistent in saying that, nope, Sam told me that Mandy just left, that Mandy left the kids. We haven't seen her since. And for a period almost seemed angry at Mandy for doing that to his brother.
Did they argue or fight often?
They fought all the time, verbally, and that's what I was used to seeing. So for her to leave was not unusual for me.
He eventually described that they did have a tumultuous relationship. There had been arguments and there had been fights. He liked Mandy. Sometimes he didn't think she was treated very well, but she had left and returned on several occasions.
Did anybody stop by the house earlier with you?
I think her name is Rachel. I don't know. Like a redhead girl.
Who is this Rachel girl? What relation does she play in this investigation?
Are they just friends, or are they something more, or what?
I mean, they're not dating.
It was very important for us to find Rachel, to speak with her and find out what, if any, involvement she had.
Rachel wasn't new to Sam's life. He had known her for a while.
Rachel, come to the door. Police department, come to the door, Rachel.
Rachel was surprised that the police were at her door there to speak with her about something involving Sam.
Did you talk to him this weekend at all?
A little bit, but it was... Our relationship has always kind of been a love-hate.
So what was he telling you about Mandy?
He had just told me that she left sometime that weekend, this past weekend with a guy. That was it. She'd done it before multiple times and come back.
She believed that they were separated, and she was told that Mandy had just run away.
Does she know they take her cut?
Well, yeah, but...
Where are the keys to the places?
I think I have them.
She all of a sudden reveals that she has the key to Mandy's Lexus car.
How and why she acquired Mandy's car was highly suspicious. She's gone, she just left. You don't ask why she doesn't have her car.
That's kind of a turning point. At this point, she started to tell a bit more of the story, tell the truth, if you will.
Rachel relayed that Sam had asked her to go place an item in a specific location. Don't ask any questions, just go make sure that it's safe here.
Sam had put a bag in the trunk of the car and asked her to drive it out to a property that belonged to his family in Lago Vista.
Will you take it there? I will. I don't have an address, but I know where it is.
She does agree to actually take the detectives out to the property in Lago Vista and show them exactly where she hid this bag of whatever it was that Sam had put in the back of her car. The bag was a clear gallon size Ziploc bag that it would be impossible for you to pick the bag up unless you did it with your eyes closed and not see the contents.
The bag had a 9mm semi-automatic pistol, which appeared to have a broken piece off the handle. It had a cell phone, and it also had glasses with potential blood on the lenses. It also had a fired shell casing.
Can you explain what this is?
Rachel still maintained that she didn't know exactly what was going on. She did this for Sam because he was insistent that she do this favor for him.
Do you know who that is?
There was a male walking on this property, turned out to be the same concerned citizen that drove up in the early morning hours of the 13th of December to provide information about Sam and Mandy.
What are you doing here? Thought I could help.
It is highly suspicious. You don't generally find people that inject themselves to that extent. And certainly in this case, where we're in the middle of nowhere, he was just wanting to help us find Mandy. He knew about this property.
There's somewhere you should look.
There was a shed of some sort.
Something going on out here. There's a place.
It was known to him that Sam used to go out to this property and hunt and take other females and have sex with them out there. So it would be a good spot if he wanted to secret Mandy away to actually hide her.
We set up a search team and we conducted a grid search of the land at this piece of property. We spent a day searching this piece of property.
And ultimately did not find Mandy. On the 14th of December, Rachel wants to talk again and reveal some more information.
I had made a decision to kind of cut ties with Sam because him and I have been romantically involved. Not at the same time as Mandy. They had broken up.
What Rachel also said was that she had not been truthful early on, but she had in fact seen what was in the bag and asked Sam, what is this about? Why is there a gun and why are these items in there? And she told us that Sam's explanation for those items were that that was his insurance.
So he invested, from what I know, like $200,000 in a business deal this year. What I was told was it was an investment in a recycling business.
And when she asked, well, insurance for what? Sam explained to her that he was involved with these business partners. There had been a large exchange of money. Now there were threats being made.
Basically what he told me, this bag will prove my innocence, will set me free.
Would you mind elaborating on that as best you can?
He has been concerned about a business deal that had gone wrong at the beginning of this year, so he felt like he had a price on his head because of this business deal.
Sam explained that it involved two brothers out in the Bastrop area of Texas.
Now we've got some brothers, a possibility of some sort of bad business deal that occurred. Did they do something to Mandy?
After they interview Rachel, investigators hunt for evidence that connects Sam Bird to the mysterious brothers in Bastrop County. At 10:41 p.m. on December 9th, 2 days before Sam visits the car wash in Cedar Park, a toll booth license plate reader pings Sam's pickup heading towards Bastrop County.
So based off that, we sent detectives to travel that same route to start trying to obtain a timeline or any video that would show this vehicle and its exact route that would take somebody from Cedar Park to this ranch in Bastrop. We were able to find several different gas stations.
Sergeant Whitley, Cedar Park PD. Are your cameras operational?
Detectives review the footage from December 9th.
Can you play from 2310?
What's helpful is Sam had that ridiculously large wrap on his truck that made his truck extremely identifiable, even from a distance.
Here you go. Stop. Punch in.
That's his truck. You can see the markings.
We did confirm that Sam Bird vehicle on the 9th of December traveled south and eventually, if you kept driving, would end up in Bastrop County, which told us that would be a likely place for him to have gone, another large ranch, and a place that we know has mud that he would need to wash off.
The toll booth camera pings Sam's truck a second time, 12 hours later on December 10th.
Can you see December 10th from 11 a.m.? Hang on, play that again. Freeze it. That's his truck coming back.
Now we knew that his vehicle, more likely than not, traveled to the ranch in Bastrop on the 9th and returned on the 10th. Our thought at that time was, what exactly was he doing for that 12-hour period of time?
Bastrop County covers an area of 900 square miles and has over 2,000 farms and ranches. Investigators must narrow down where in the county Sam drove to on December 9th.
In the days following the initial disappearance of Mandy, we sought the help of the local media, asking if anybody had any information or had any knowledge to please reach out to us in regards to the whereabouts of Mandy.
Lieutenant Bond?
Shortly after that, I received an anonymous tip through a phone call. And that person wanted to let me know that there was a business partnership that involved a shingle recycling facility down in the Bastrop, Texas area.
I appreciate it.
Rachel had also provided information that there was some form of partnership with people that were in Bastrop.
What I was told was it was an investment in a recycling business.
So that became our priority, was to investigate the ranch in this location. We already had some information as to, it was brothers, they owned the ranch, and they may have operated some sort of shingle recycling facility. We were able to get a phone number and an address for those brothers and reach out to one of the brothers by phone
Hi, I'm hoping you can help.
He was very cooperative. He told us that, yes, he knew Sam. They had been business partners for quite some time.
The brothers agreed to let the detectives come and visit the ranch.
When I traveled out to Bastrop, what immediately caught my attention and stuck out to me was the dirt.
The color of the soil matches the mud on Sam's pickup at the car wash on December 11th.
Can you describe to us Sam's involvement in this property?
Sure. He's been here many times.
The brothers explained that Sam had a mobile home on this property that he used as a place to bring women and be romantically involved with and things.
One brother reveals he received a text from Sam on December 9.
Sam had asked to come out and burn some trash. And he told Sam that was okay, but didn't ask any further questions.
My brother saw him on the day.
There was flames in the air about 10 feet high, and he yelled at him that he needed to leave, but he didn't immediately leave. So that became our first stop. Mr. Martinez showed us where the burn pit was. It was a very large, probably 125 to 150 foot diameter area where it looked like things of all sorts had been burned at some point. Within 5 or 10 minutes of sifting through just the very top portion of the dirt, we began to find very small pieces of white fragmented bone that appeared to be human in nature. We were able to confirm that those were human bone fragments. One search and rescue told us that the cadaver dogs did alert to a pond through a wooded area.
The brothers had explained that they had seen Sam traveling back and forth towards this area multiple times while the fire was going.
It was too shallow and muddy for divers to go in, such as they would a lake, so we were going to have to actually drain the pond. What was ultimately found were bone fragments, a single projectile that was misshapen from an extremely hot process, and there was also jewelry.
Those items I took that afternoon to Debbie. And I asked Debbie if she could identify any of the jewelry. And she identified all of it.
They had the actual jewelry. They brought it into my house and showed it to me.
That's when it was confirmed, not only with us, but with her, that Mandy was deceased.
The worst part is it's in having someone confirm they have the evidence.
Police compare the found teeth with Mandy's dental records. This check confirms the remains belong to Mandy Gordon.
I was in shock the whole time. I couldn't believe any of this was happening. She was my sister. It was very hard to find out that I was never gonna see her again.
At the police department, digital forensic officers cracked the DVR from Sam Bird's home surveillance system. Detectives analyzed the footage for clues that might reveal how Mandy died.
Sam did his very best to delete as much as possible, but it is very difficult to delete everything.
Let's see what you got.
There was a camera that looked in the backyard in between the back of the main house in the office shed.
The camera detects movement at 11:54 p.m. on December 8th.
What was that?
Mandy ran from the residence into the office shed. The video and pictures tell us that he chased after her. Shortly after that, we saw Sam Bird moving about.
Rewind.
It was the middle of the night, and he was in only his underwear, in a very strange behavior.
Continue.
Detectives watched the footage from the morning of the following day, December 9th.
Sam was going back and forth between the main house into the shed. In the afternoon, as we're watching Sam, he has a power washer and that he's using it in the area between the house and the shed.
Punch in.
Later in the afternoon, about 5:30, he hunches over in the yard as if he's about to vomit.
The camera clicks to night vision after sunset on December 9th.
What's he doing now?
So at 7:45, he disables the porch light that was illuminating the backyard.
And that allowed him to not be seen by neighbors or by people driving down the road.
And it appears that he's moving some stuff around the area where his truck is and around the shed.
Where's he going?
He ends up unplugging the camera and it goes off.
Sam then dismantles his security system to erase the evidence of what happened to Mandy. But he misses a trick.
The interesting thing about some of these systems is that when it sees movement, it will take a snapshot and send it to your mobile device.
Let's see what you recovered from his phone.
It's got a screenshot of the beginning of the video. If you delete the video itself, it doesn't delete those same thumbnails.
We were able to locate 4 photos.
Can I see the first image? It's fuzzy. Punch in.
That's Mandy.
Mandy is running. It's kind of hard to make her out because her image of her body is in motion. We don't see Sam in that photo. The next one, we see Sam crouched over on the right side of the frame. We see legs. We see a pool of what appears to be blood on the other end of the room.
There's something on the floor near the blood.
There's also, looks like a shattered piece of wood that's near that small pool of blood by that desk.
Show the next one.
I see Mandy's body pulled a little bit farther away from the door into frame. He's crouched over her. You see obvious trauma around the head area and a significant amount of blood. The next photo is him out. He's just in his underwear. He's stepping around Mandy. We see a huge amount of blood.
We have 4 photos of the actual murder itself occurring inside the shed. And we now know that Sam Bird had committed the murder and taken the life of Mandy Gordon. Sam Bird was charged with felony murder of Mandy Gordon.
Samuel Bird pled guilty to first-degree murder in November of 2022. He had to write and sign a judicial confession admitting that he intentionally and knowingly caused her death by shooting her with a firearm.
On the day that Mandy was murdered, she got home on the 8th, went inside, had some sort of conversation with Sam Bird.
There was an argument, and I'm sure it's about their relationship.
I believe this very much angered Sam, who retrieved a pistol, threatened Mandy with a pistol. I believe at that point, Mandy ran from the residence into the office shed. He chased after her, followed her to the back of the shed. Most likely, he struck her on top of the head with the butt of the pistol.
He hit her in the corner of the room. I think that's what broke the pistol, and I think that's what caused that amount of blood. And I think as she left, he shot her. Shot her in the head, and she dropped right where we see her in the screenshots.
Once Sam took Mandy's life, I don't believe he had a specific plan. He needed to hide her body.
Sam's own surveillance system records him as he cleans up after the murder. He later disables his cameras and then loads Mandy's body and other incriminating evidence into his pickup.
He was able to get Mandy into the bed of his truck, load all of this stuff up on top of her so she wouldn't be seen, drove her body to the burn pit at the ranch in Bastrop, used gasoline to pour over, continuously set fire to her body, reducing it to small bone fragments and ash. Happy that surveillance video worked, that the cameras actually recorded.
The images that were collected from Sam's phone were crucial in his conviction. Him standing over Mandy in the shed. And with video and surveillance from the gas stations that he drove past to get to the ranch where he disposed of her, it was essential to the investigation.
Following his guilty plea, Sam Bird is sentenced to 45 years in prison. Investigators find no evidence that Josiah Bird, Rachel Buckley, nor the brothers at the ranch had any knowledge of or involvement in Mandy's murder. They are charged with no crime in relation to her killing. Investigators find no evidence that the brothers engaged in bad business practices or used threats.
The only charges that were brought were against Sam Bird. Rachel Buckley was utilized as a witness. Josiah Bird was also used as a witness. The business partners were also involved as witnesses. All roads led back to Sam Bird, and he was the one charged with Mandy's murder.
There are so many unanswered questions. I'm very, very angry. He has no remorse. He is a menace to society and should never be let out.
I'm not going to be able to ever forgive Sam because I feel like he stole from me and I'll never be able to get it back.
It's important that Mandy's story is heard. Domestic violence is a lot more than, a couple bumps and bruises. It can escalate to what this turned into.
I want Jack and Sally to remember their mom as a wonderful person that was always there for them. They would do anything for them.
I adopted Sally and Jack. They have questions. They are still dealing with this. Sally and Jack both know what happened. They were there when it happened. Their mom was taken from them. And I can't fix that.
Next time on See No Evil.
I need to send the police here. My boss told me it's not there. You must person.
It was shocking. I was just blown away.
Everything about his behavior is suspicious.
One way or the other, I was gonna get answers.
It was a Thursday night, the air thick with humidity, the kind that clings to your skin and whispers that something is wrong. The streets of small-town Texas were empty, save for the distant hum of a lone pickup truck. Lights flickered in the corner gas station, neon buzzing like a restless heartbeat. Somewhere in the darkness, someone noticed a shadow that didn't belong. A young woman, barely 23, vanished without a trace. Her name was Emily Hart, a quiet presence in a town that barely knew how to react when darkness crept too close. Her car was found at the edge of the old railroad tracks, the engine still warm, keys in the ignition, and the smell of perfume lingering, like a memory refusing to die. Panic spread through the community, but in a town built on routine and familiarity, it never occurred to anyone that the story would remain unresolved for decades. The first officers arrived quickly, their radios crackling with static and unease. Officer Daniels, seasoned but weary, stepped out and scanned the area, flashlight slicing through the night. The tracks were slick with rain from earlier that evening, glinting under the weak beam. Nothing seemed out of place, yet the sense of wrongness was palpable. A discarded cigarette butt, a faint tire mark, leading into the brush. A hair caught on the rusty fence, faint but visible. Every detail became a clue, every shadow a suspect, but answers were elusive. Witnesses came forward, a neighbor who swore she heard footsteps around midnight, a trucker who recalled a car parked strangely by the tracks, and a teenager who thought he saw someone dragging something into the trees. All accounts, conflicting, fragmented, like pieces of a puzzle no one could solve. The case quickly earned the label the community dreaded: unsolved. A cold case before anyone had time to process the heat of grief. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. The investigation unfolded methodically yet frustratingly slow. Detectives pored over the small town, questioning locals, checking phone records, analyzing Emily's last known interactions. Her life was ordinary, almost painfully so. A part-time barista, a volunteer at the local animal shelter, a few close friends, no enemies that anyone could name. But the absence of obvious motives only deepened the mystery. Detective Harris, leading the task force, often sat in the dim glow of his office, staring at photographs spread across the table, trying to see what everyone else had missed. Maps were pinned on the walls, routes traced and retraced, alibis scrutinized. Nothing broke through the veil. Days blurred together, the silence growing heavier in the room, almost as if the building itself mourned with the investigators. Strange anomalies began to surface. A voicemail left on Emily's phone, recorded just hours before she disappeared, static cutting through her voice. A receipt for an item she claimed never to buy. A janitor at the high school remembering seeing her near the storage rooms long after the last bell, a detail she hadn't shared with anyone. Each clue teased more than it revealed, creating tension that stretched across the town like an unending wire. Rumors spread, whispered in grocery stores and cafes, a mixture of fear and fascination. Someone suggested she ran away, tired of small-town life. Another theory pointed to a stranger passing through. Mothers clutched their children tighter. Baristas watched the doors like sentinels, and every creak in a floorboard became a threat. The shadow of Emily's absence hovered over the town, a ghost that refused to rest. Months later, the first breakthrough came in the form of a man named Roland McKinney, a drifter with a reputation for petty crimes. He claimed he remembered Emily, saw her that night near the tracks, but his account was inconsistent, fragmented, riddled with contradictions. His story created more questions than answers. Was he lying? Was he protecting someone? Or was he the key no one wanted to see? Detectives weighed his words, analyzing tone, body language, the slight hesitation before each sentence. The community grew anxious as whispers of a possible suspect spread, the tension thickening like fog over the railroad tracks. Meanwhile, forensic technology in 2005 was advancing, but DNA evidence was limited, fingerprints smudged, fibers contaminated by the elements. The leads evaporated into frustration. Emily's case became a ghost of its own, haunting the precinct and the town alike. Years passed. Emily's parents aged, the grief etched into their faces, their eyes hollowed by the weight of uncertainty. Community gatherings often paused in silence, the memory of the young woman lingering like smoke. Detectives retired, reassigned, or succumbed to burnout, and each new officer inherited the case like a relic too heavy to lift. The cold case file sat on dusty shelves, labeled, cataloged, forgotten by some, feared by others. Occasional tips would arrive, an anonymous letter claiming knowledge of her whereabouts, a call from a nearby state, but each one ended in dead ends. Yet the air of unease never left the town. Each disappearance is a ripple in the collective consciousness, but Emily's was a storm that refused to dissipate. By 2010, social media began to breathe new life into cold cases. Forums, blogs, amateur detectives scouring public records and satellite images. Emily's face appeared online, countless times, her eyes staring from screens in living rooms far away from Texas, her story discussed in hushed tones and heated debates. Some theorized she had been abducted by someone close, others believed a stranger, passing through, took her. Every new theory carried the same pulse of fear and fascination. Locals were divided, hope and skepticism battling quietly, unseen but omnipresent. Even those who barely remembered her began to feel the weight of absence, the intangible pull of unfinished stories. Then, in 2012, an old evidence locker was reopened. A piece of fabric, long ignored, examined with the latest DNA testing, matched a known offender in a neighboring county. The revelation was seismic. Forensic results confirmed twice created a tremor in the investigative community. Emily's case, cold for nearly 7 years, was suddenly alive again. The suspect, now in his late 30s, had a history of similar behavior, but nothing had ever connected him directly to her disappearance. Officers scrambled, tracing his movements, reviewing old interviews, piecing together a timeline that, when viewed in the harsh light of modern technology, revealed cracks that had been invisible before. It was a web of deception, missed opportunities, and sheer chance that had kept him hidden for so long. The community, meanwhile, oscillated between hope and dread. Every knock on a door, every phone call, every unmarked car parked near familiar streets was met with suspicion. Emily's parents, weary yet clinging to fragile hope, spoke cautiously to media crews, their voices steady despite trembling hands. Friends gathered quietly, exchanging memories, piecing together fragments of the life that had been stolen. But even as new leads emerged, the psychological weight of unresolved mystery hung over everyone. Townsfolk spoke in whispers, a language of fear and speculation, sharing theories in corners of diners and quiet bars. The tension became palpable, almost a character in itself, moving through the streets like an invisible predator. Then came the twist that no one expected. In 2013, surveillance footage from a local convenience store previously overlooked was digitally enhanced. A shadowy figure was revealed, not a stranger, but someone Emily knew, someone from the town, someone trusted. The revelation shattered assumptions. Detectives were stunned. Families whispered disbelief. The local police department faced scrutiny and self-recrimination. How could they have missed it for so long? Questions hung in the air, dense and suffocating. Every detail was re-examined, alibis questioned, timelines reconstructed. The fabric of the community trembled under the weight of betrayal and shock. The investigation now surged with intensity, fueled by a mix of rage, determination, and the urgent need for justice. Detectives revisited old witness statements, noting inconsistencies that once seemed trivial. They retraced Emily's last known steps, scanning old routes, searching the woods and fields near the tracks, interrogating individuals who had once seemed irrelevant. The suspect, cornered by evidence and renewed scrutiny, finally broke under pressure, offering a confession that was chilling in its clarity and coldness. What had seemed like a random disappearance now revealed layers of planning, deception, and calculated manipulation. The revelation rippled across Texas, a story of horror cloaked in familiarity, the kind that chills a town to its bones. Emily's case, finally moving toward resolution, left behind a trail of emotional devastation. Her story, once a fragment of a headline, became a testament to the persistence of justice, the fragility of trust, and the endurance of grief. Families who had feared closure would never come, and communities who had become numb to uncertainty, suddenly faced the raw exposure of truth. Even as arrests were made and charges filed, the haunting questions lingered. What could have been seen sooner? Who else had known? How many moments had slipped through unnoticed? The shadow of the cold case remained, a permanent scar etched into the collective memory of a town that had learned the harshest lesson of all: that the past never truly stays buried. The confession came in fragments, sharp and precise, like shards of glass cutting through the years of silence. Detectives replayed every statement, every pause, every glance, piecing together a timeline that seemed impossible, surreal. Emily had known him, trusted him, and yet, in the hours before her disappearance, the man had plotted with a calculated patience that now made every missed sign unbearable. The community reeled. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors, the familiar streets now twisted in shadow and suspicion. A man they had nodded to, waved at, perhaps even shared a smile with, was suddenly the center of a nightmare that had haunted their town for nearly a decade. The ordinary lives of ordinary people had been shattered, and the ripple spread outward with relentless force. Police returned to the tracks where Emily's car had been found. The railroad slept quietly, indifferent to the horror once etched into its rails. Forensic teams worked in silence, meticulously re-examining every inch. Soil samples, fibers, faint imprints, details long dismissed or overlooked, were suddenly alive with meaning. The world had changed since 2005. Forensic science had evolved. Digital enhancement revealed what human eyes could not. A shoe print, faint in the mud, was matched to a brand only the suspect had worn. A strand of hair, once thought insignificant, tied to him through DNA that was irrefutable. Detectives walked the tracks, tracing the route Emily might have taken, imagining her last moments, heart pounding, every sound amplified in the mind's ear. Fear and horror interlaced with a grim satisfaction. After years, a breakthrough. Yet the satisfaction was fleeting. The story of Emily's end was far from complete, and the darkness that had lingered for so long now revealed new layers, twisting even more tightly around those left behind. Families were called back to the station. The Hart family, pale and thin with years of grief etched in their bones, entered the interrogation room, eyes wide with a mixture of hope and terror. They had lived with the unbearable tension of the unknown for nearly a decade, clinging to threads of hope that perhaps Emily had simply disappeared, chosen to vanish, or been taken by fate alone. Now the possibility of confrontation with the truth was here, jagged and raw. Every question hung in the air, pregnant with the weight of years. Friends, neighbors, co-workers, anyone who had crossed paths with Emily, revisited memories once sweet, now tainted by suspicion and dread. Conversations were whispered, pauses loaded with meaning, small towns breathing collectively in fear of what they might uncover. The suspect's demeanor was unnerving, calm, almost clinical, yet beneath the surface simmered tension, guilt, the faintest tremor betraying emotions he otherwise refused to acknowledge. He described details that seemed impossibly precise, locations, movements, even phrases Emily had used, details no outsider could know. Detectives cross-referenced everything, every detail aligned, every story matched in a way that left no room for denial. The confession was not only a revelation, it was a map of deception, a methodical plan executed with horrifying accuracy. Every missed step, every overlooked moment from years past, now exposed the vulnerability of a community that had once believed itself safe. The shock was not merely in the act itself, but in the realization that it had happened under the noses of those who thought they knew everything about the people they saw every day. News of the confession spread like wildfire. Local media outlets scrambled to report, headlines splashed across screens. Cold case cracked, shocking twist stuns Texas town. Emily Hart mystery solved after 8 years. The words themselves felt inadequate, unable to contain the mixture of relief, horror, and disbelief that gripped the community. Calls flooded police stations, neighbors demanded answers, and social media erupted with speculation. Forums dissected every known fact, every possible motive. People debated whether the town could ever truly recover, whether trust could ever be rebuilt. But amidst the chaos, one constant remained: Emily's absence. No confession, no amount of justice, could erase the void she had left. Her story had become part of the town's collective consciousness, a scar that refused to fade. Investigators began retracing her last steps in painstaking detail. The bar she worked at, the animal shelter she volunteered at, the convenience store near the tracks, all locations became sites of meticulous study. Footage was analyzed frame by frame, witnesses re-interviewed, small inconsistencies scrutinized. Every detail mattered. A barista remembered Emily asking about a stranger's car. A janitor recalled seeing her linger near the back doors. These fragments, once considered trivial, became crucial threads in the tapestry of truth. The sense of closure was partial, incomplete, yet electrifying. Forensic breakthroughs, previously impossible, now shone like beacons through the fog of years. The cold case had thawed, revealing both horrors and the faint, glimmering promise of resolution. Even as progress accelerated, the emotional toll deepened. Residents reported sleepless nights, nightmares, a persistent anxiety that clung to the air like smoke. The suspect's betrayal had not only violated Emily's life, but the implicit trust of an entire town. Parents clutched children a little tighter, couples glanced at strangers a little warier, and friends questioned what they thought they knew about those closest to them. The social fabric stretched thin, the familiar rendered foreign, every smile potentially concealing darkness. Therapy sessions, support groups, quiet conversations in kitchens and living rooms became lifelines for those trying to reconcile the shock with daily life. The community, once wrapped in the comfort of routine, now operated in a heightened state of awareness, acutely attuned to subtle warning signs and strange behavior. Amid the turmoil, a forensic breakthrough brought an unexpected twist. An item recovered near the tracks, long believed irrelevant, a simple, worn notebook, contained coded entries that initially seemed like a teenager's diary ramblings. But advanced pattern analysis revealed names, dates, locations, and hints that implicated additional participants. Emily's disappearance was no longer a single thread, but part of a larger, darker weave. The revelation sent shockwaves through the investigative team. Questions mounted. Were there accomplices? Were there crimes still undiscovered? Each new possibility expanded the scope of the investigation exponentially, forcing detectives to reassess assumptions, examine old files, and revisit interviews that had previously seemed closed. The complexity of the case deepened, proving that even solved mysteries could conceal deeper truths, layers hidden beneath years of accumulated dust, denial, and oversight. Media coverage intensified. National outlets began reporting, interviews with detectives aired on television, and documentaries in pre-production sought to capture the chilling saga. The town, once a quiet speck on the map, was suddenly a focal point of morbid fascination. News vans parked outside homes, reporters combed through streets, and cameras caught fleeting glimpses of residents whose expressions revealed both pride and pain. The juxtaposition of relief and horror created a strange, electric atmosphere. Some celebrated the unearthing of truth, others recoiled at the intrusion, feeling the story's retelling as a fresh wound. Yet all were captivated, drawn into the narrative of betrayal, mystery, and long-delayed justice. As the investigation progressed, the suspect's history was dissected in public forums. Psychologists offered insights, criminologists analyzed behavior, and law enforcement highlighted patterns of manipulation and secrecy. The confession revealed not only the crime itself, but the psychological scaffolding that had enabled it to remain hidden. Planning, patience, exploitation of trust. These elements became lessons and warnings, reminders that evil can reside behind familiar faces, and that vigilance is a collective responsibility. The town absorbed these lessons painfully, balancing the need for closure with the recognition that the story had forever changed the way they understood safety, intimacy, and community. Even as legal proceedings commenced, the town's emotional narrative continued independently of courts and convictions. Memorials for Emily, once modest, now grew into sites of reflection and commemoration. Candles flickered at night near the tracks where she vanished, flowers bloomed in her favorite spots, and photographs, carefully preserved by friends and family, reminded all who saw them of the life abruptly stolen. Discussions arose about prevention, about community watch programs, about education for young people about danger and trust. The tragedy became a catalyst, transforming fear into awareness, grief into action, and absence into a complex legacy that intertwined memory, justice, and ongoing vigilance. But the shadow remained. Even with the suspect in custody, confessions recorded, evidence cataloged, and justice moving forward, the haunting presence of unanswered questions lingered. What had truly been seen and overlooked? How many signs had been missed? How many small, seemingly trivial details could have changed the course of history if noticed in time? Emily's disappearance had left a permanent imprint, a collective scar that refused to fade. Residents walked streets with heightened awareness. Conversations were shadowed by the knowledge that evil can be close, and children were raised with stories tinged with caution. The case, though technically solved, remained alive in hearts and minds, a cold, lingering presence that refused to be relegated to history. Even with the suspect behind bars, the case refused to settle. Each day brought new revelations, small tremors in a story that had already shaken the town to its core. Detectives revisited phone records, computer logs, emails, anything digital that could provide insight into the months leading up to Emily's disappearance. Every conversation she had, every message she sent, became a thread to follow, a clue to untangle the web of planning that had gone unnoticed for years. The evidence, once dormant, now spoke loudly, almost as if the case itself demanded attention, unwilling to allow the town a simple, clean closure. Patterns emerged. Connections previously dismissed as coincidences began to align, creating a picture that was as chilling as it was meticulous. Emily's last week was dissected in painful detail. Cafes she had visited, streets she had walked, the bus stops she had passed, they all became part of a timeline painstakingly reconstructed. A clerk remembered her purchasing a notebook, the same one recovered years later near the tracks. A coworker recalled a phone call she had seemed uneasy about, one she had hung up quickly. Even small habits, her route to work, the way she always greeted neighbors, were scrutinized. Each seemingly mundane detail now bore the weight of potential significance. The town's collective memory became a tool for investigation. Conversations that had once felt casual now became testimonies, and every familiar street felt more like a stage set for an invisible drama. The suspect's confession revealed layers that no one had anticipated. He spoke calmly, almost clinically, describing interactions with Emily that seemed innocuous at the time, but in retrospect were carefully calculated. The details were precise, chillingly precise, and painted a picture of premeditation that intensified the community's shock. Detectives felt a mix of horror and awe, awareness that the crime could have been prevented, and yet the clever manipulation had rendered Emily's disappearance nearly invisible. The confession created a ripple effect. Families revisited old conversations, wondering whether they had missed subtle warnings. Friends questioned the meaning behind words and gestures. The town collectively realized that the past had been there all along, quietly shaping events, hiding in plain sight. As the legal process moved forward, forensic breakthroughs continued. Items once considered irrelevant were analyzed with modern techniques. Fibers matched the suspect's clothing, soil samples linked him to locations previously unconnected, and digital traces, emails, call logs, GPS data, filled gaps in the timeline. It became clear that Emily's disappearance was not a random act, but a carefully orchestrated sequence of events, executed with precision, patience, and an unnerving awareness of investigative procedures. Detectives marveled at the audacity, anger mingling with disbelief. The case, dormant for years, had returned with a vengeance, forcing law enforcement and community alike to confront the complexity of human deception. The media attention escalated. Every day, new headlines splashed across newspapers, television screens, and online feeds. Cold case solved, Emily Hart's disappearance explained. Twist shocks, Texas town, familiar face behind long unsolved mystery. Justice after 8 years, how forensics unraveled a perfect crime. The words seemed inadequate to capture the intensity, the betrayal, the emotional turbulence. Journalists interviewed neighbors, friends, co-workers, even schoolmates, constructing a mosaic of recollections, each piece colored by fear, memory, and speculation. Social media debates flared. Was the confession credible? Were there accomplices? And could the town ever regain trust? The story was no longer local. It had transcended geography, touching audiences across the nation. Within the town, the psychological toll deepened. Residents walked streets warily, seeing familiar faces in a new light, aware that evil could hide behind ordinary smiles. Parents tightened their hold on children, friends observed friends with cautious curiosity, and the collective consciousness was forever altered. Therapy sessions, support groups, and whispered conversations became lifelines, ways to process the unrelenting tension. The town was alive with quiet anxiety, every small sound amplified, every unfamiliar presence a possible threat. The layers of fear that had accumulated over years of uncertainty now merged with shock, grief, and cautious relief, creating a complex emotional landscape that would linger long after the court's gavel fell. Amidst the turmoil, new evidence emerged that deepened the mystery. The suspect's notebook, carefully analyzed, revealed cryptic entries that suggested Emily had been followed for months, locations she had frequented, seemingly random encounters, and personal details, all cataloged in a manner that was both meticulous and terrifying. Experts noted the psychological implications: obsession, surveillance, and an unnerving anticipation of law enforcement's moves. The town struggled to comprehend the scale of planning. What had once seemed like random chance now appeared as deliberate orchestration. Emily's disappearance was not an accident, but a product of a mind capable of manipulating perception and exploiting trust. The realization brought a collective shiver, reinforcing that even solved cases can leave an unhealed wound. Detectives expanded the investigation, searching for overlooked connections, reviewing old interviews, and examining evidence in light of the new confession. Witnesses were re-interviewed, often under the intense scrutiny of modern forensic insight. Some memories were flawed, others astonishingly accurate, but all contributed to a growing clarity about the events leading to Emily's disappearance. Patterns emerged in behavior, movement, and communication that had previously gone unnoticed. Investigators felt a mix of triumph and despair, triumph at uncovering truth, despair at realizing how long it had taken and how easily it had been concealed. Every revelation deepened the psychological weight of the case, reinforcing the town's collective unease and fascination. The court proceedings began, a spectacle of tension and anticipation. The suspect's demeanor remained unnervingly calm, while the community, already fractured by fear and suspicion, faced the reality of legal reckoning. Families of the victim and the town at large attended hearings, sitting quietly, absorbing the details of crimes that had unfolded long before they had fully grasped their significance. Each testimony, piece of evidence, and confession read like a chapter in a nightmare. Legal arguments intertwined with emotional testimonies, and the courtroom became a microcosm of the town's struggle to reconcile grief, justice, and the long shadow of betrayal. The proceedings were not merely legal, they were cathartic, horrifying, and mesmerizing all at once. Outside the courthouse, the atmosphere was electric. Media vans lined the streets, reporters spoke in hushed, urgent tones, and townspeople gathered, some hopeful, others skeptical, all grappling with the ramifications of the case. Conversations shifted from speculation to reflection. Who could have predicted such a betrayal? How could a trusted individual manipulate a community so thoroughly? The questions lingered, unanswered, their weight pressing on the collective consciousness. Children whispered stories about Emily, adults debated the lessons learned, and the town, forever altered, continued to live under the quiet shadow of events that had begun nearly a decade earlier. As the trial unfolded, the suspect's confession revealed layers previously unconsidered. Not only had he been responsible for Emily's disappearance, but he had manipulated evidence, misled investigators, and carefully concealed his presence in ways that challenged the limits of forensic science at the time. The depth of deception was staggering. Detectives revisited old theories, confirming that many had been plausible yet overlooked. The case became a lesson in diligence, skepticism, and the importance of revisiting even seemingly closed leads. The psychological complexity of the crime fascinated criminologists, journalists, and the community alike, reinforcing that truth is often stranger and darker than fiction. Even as justice progressed, the town grappled with the lingering presence of absence. Memorials for Emily expanded, candles flickered along the tracks, and photographs of her smiled from walls, desks, and frames in quiet homes. The collective memory, though painful, became a form of resistance against the erasure imposed by the years of uncertainty. Children asked questions, parents hesitated, and conversations about trust, vigilance, and community responsibility became commonplace. Emily's disappearance, once an unthinkable void, now informed daily life, shaping perceptions, behaviors, and the way people moved through familiar streets. The town was forever marked, its rhythm altered, its awareness heightened. And yet, even with confessions, evidence, and legal proceedings underway, questions persisted. Was this the full extent of the crime? Could there have been additional victims? How many subtle signals had been missed, misread, or ignored? The town's collective mind struggled with the duality of closure and uncertainty. Even as the suspect faced justice, the psychological echoes of the crime remained, vibrating through memories, conversations, and the quiet hum of daily life. Emily's story, though partially resolved, continued to shape the emotional and moral landscape of a community forced to confront the fragility of trust, the persistence of evil, and the necessity of vigilance. The courtroom drama unfolded with relentless intensity. Every word, every piece of evidence, every photograph of Emily displayed on the screen sent ripples through the audience. Her parents sat rigid, hands clasped, knuckles white, hearts suspended between hope and dread. Friends whispered quietly, trying to reconcile the memories of the woman they knew with the chilling details emerging from the witness stand. The suspect sat across from them, calm, almost unnervingly detached, his gaze occasionally drifting toward the jury as if assessing their reactions. There was no remorse in his eyes, only a cold, calculated awareness of the power he still held over the story, over the town, over the people who had once trusted him. Outside the courthouse, tension was palpable. Reporters jostled for position, cameras flashed like lightning in the gray Texas sky, and townspeople gathered in hushed clusters, trading fragments of information. Conversations oscillated between disbelief and morbid fascination. Every familiar face seemed suspect, every gesture open to interpretation. The quiet streets, once mundane, now vibrated with a charged energy. Parents checked doors and windows more frequently, teenagers walked home in clusters, and every passerby was subject to scrutiny. The shadow of the crime lingered over the town like a storm cloud that refused to dissipate, coloring everyday life with fear and vigilance. Investigators continued their meticulous work behind the scenes. Digital evidence revealed the suspect had been tracking Emily for weeks before the disappearance, using obscure methods to avoid detection. Calls made to burner phones, messages hidden in innocuous social media posts, GPS signals routed through multiple devices, all designed to mask the true intent and movements. Detectives pored over logs, charts, and timelines, tracing connections that were invisible to the naked eye. Every small detail, once dismissed, now held monumental significance. A pattern emerged. The suspect had exploited trust, routine, and familiarity to orchestrate a plan that seemed almost invisible. a shadow moving seamlessly through the fabric of the town's life. The confession revealed chilling new layers. The suspect described not only the planning, but the psychological manipulation that ensured Emily would follow predictable paths. He knew her habits, her preferences, her fears, even the people she trusted most. His ability to predict behavior was methodical, almost clinical, demonstrating a mind capable of controlling events without detection. The revelation sent shivers through the investigative team. Years of missed signs, overlooked opportunities, and near coincidences were suddenly visible in the stark light of calculated intention. It was a portrait of predation that was as horrifying as it was meticulous, leaving everyone involved grappling with the extent of deception that had taken place under their very noses. As the trial progressed, more victims emerged from the shadows. Past incidents, once considered isolated, were now connected through forensic evidence and confessions. The suspect's history painted a picture of recurring predatory behavior, carefully concealed and meticulously executed. Each revelation intensified the sense of betrayal felt by the community. People who had believed in the ordinary, in the safety of familiar faces, were forced to confront the uncomfortable truth that darkness had been quietly operating in plain sight. Every neighbor, every friend, every family member who had interacted with him began questioning their past experiences, looking for signs they might have missed, wondering how many other lives had been touched by the same invisible hand. Emily's parents endured the slow unfolding of truth with a mixture of grief, relief, and unrelenting sorrow. Each new detail was both a confirmation of what had happened and a reopening of wounds thought to have begun healing. Their evenings were filled with memories replayed against the backdrop of forensic revelations, each juxtaposition sharper, more painful than the last. Friends and family leaned on each other, exchanging quiet reassurances, attempting to navigate the turbulent sea of emotion that the trial stirred. Every day brought the duality of closure and horror, a strange, exhausting balance between knowing the truth and confronting its implications. The town itself was transformed. Streets, once familiar and safe, now seemed laden with stories of what had been concealed. Local businesses reported a mixture of curiosity and anxiety. Parents hesitated before letting children walk alone. Friendships were reevaluated under the lens of suspicion. The psychological weight of Emily's disappearance, compounded by years of uncertainty, now manifested as a collective hyper-awareness. Conversations in cafes and grocery stores carried an undertone of vigilance, a subtle reminder that trust was no longer absolute. Every small detail became amplified: a shadow on a fence, a car parked too long, a figure walking along the tracks. Life continued, but it was never quite the same, never quite ordinary again. Forensic breakthroughs continued to astonish. Objects that had seemed irrelevant in 2005, buttons, fabric fibers, small scratches on a fence post, were now crucial evidence. DNA traces, enhanced through new technology, corroborated the suspect's narrative. The puzzle, once fragmented and chaotic, was slowly forming a cohesive, chilling image. Investigators marveled at the evolution of their tools and the persistence required to uncover a decade-old truth. Every small breakthrough felt monumental, each connection a step closer to understanding the full scope of what had happened. Yet, with each revelation came new questions, subtle hints that not everything had been revealed, that shadows still lingered at the edges of comprehension. Emily's story became a lesson not just in justice, but in vigilance. Community programs were established, schools held workshops, and local authorities emphasized awareness and personal safety. Conversations shifted from speculation to education, from fear to action. The town collectively processed the trauma through remembrance, advocacy, and a heightened sense of responsibility. Emily's absence, once an unbearable void, became a catalyst for awareness and prevention. Her memory inspired vigilance and community cohesion, a paradoxical blend of grief and empowerment. Still, the emotional residue of the crime persisted. Residents spoke of dreams and nightmares, moments when they felt watched or followed, and the quiet dread that sometimes gripped the streets at dusk. Emily's parents carried a permanent ache, a reminder that while legal justice could be served, Emotional and psychological healing was an ongoing, uncertain process. Friends and neighbors shared stories, some uplifting, some devastating, as they sought meaning and resolution. The town, forever changed, continued to live with the awareness that the ordinary can conceal extraordinary danger, and that even solved cases leave indelible scars on collective memory. The final stages of the trial delivered a harrowing clarity. The suspect, faced with incontrovertible evidence, maintained a veneer of composure, yet subtle tremors betrayed an underlying awareness of exposure. Cross-examination peeled away layers of deception, revealing contradictions, omissions, and unspoken truths. The courtroom was tense, silent except for the stark cadence of legal dialogue and the occasional intake of breath from the audience. Every revelation sent waves of emotion through those present: disbelief, horror, sorrow, and a grim sense of satisfaction that the truth, however bitter, was finally surfacing. Outside, the media documented every development. Reporters stood in relentless anticipation, live broadcasts capturing the reactions of the town, families, and investigators. Headlines screamed, "Cold Case Climax, Confession Rocks Texas Community." Emily Hart mystery revealed after 8 years. Justice and horror intertwined as courtroom drama unfolds. The words carried weight, but could never fully capture the emotional complexity, a mixture of vindication, grief, and enduring unease. Social media threads dissected the minutiae, online communities debated motives and behavior, and the story reverberated beyond the borders of the state, resonating with audiences nationwide. Even with a verdict imminent, the emotional impact was far from over. The community continued to navigate the intersection of relief and trauma. Parents walked children home with heightened caution. Friends revisited past interactions for overlooked clues. Local gatherings included moments of remembrance, brief acknowledgments of the horror that had unfolded amidst everyday life. Emily's absence remained a silent, pervasive presence, a reminder that some losses are never fully resolved, that even solved mysteries leave emotional landscapes forever altered. The psychological aftermath extended to the investigative team as well. Detectives who had pursued the case for years grappled with the weight of responsibility and the haunting knowledge of what might have been noticed sooner. Their reflections, conversations, and reports became part of a collective understanding of human behavior, deception, and the relentless pursuit of truth. Each new revelation underscored the delicate balance between diligence and chance, showing how minute details can be the difference between unresolved horror and long-delayed justice. As Part 4 concludes, the town of Texas, forever shadowed by Emily Hart's disappearance and the shocking revelation of the suspect's identity, stands at the threshold between closure and lingering unease. The courtroom drama, forensic breakthroughs, confessions, and community response have illuminated the darkness, but the emotional and psychological echoes remain, palpable in streets, homes, and hearts alike. Emily's story, while partially resolved, continues to shape the collective consciousness, a testament to the enduring tension between truth, memory, and the shadowed spaces where trust once lived. Even as the courtroom reached its crescendo, new whispers surfaced, subtle but insistent. An old neighbor came forward, shaking hands and nervous eyes, recounting a fleeting memory of Emily walking alone near the railroad tracks weeks before her disappearance. Another witness, a delivery driver, remembered seeing the suspect's vehicle parked unusually long near the outskirts of town on the same night. Details once dismissed as irrelevant now took on chilling significance. Investigators pored over the minutiae, aware that the smallest oversight might reveal untold layers of truth. The town, already strained by years of suspense, braced itself for revelations that could fracture its fragile sense of normalcy once more. Emily's parents, sitting quietly in the courtroom, felt a mixture of vindication and dread. Each confession, each forensic breakthrough, peeled away layers of uncertainty, revealing a stark and unflinching reality. Their minds retraced the last moments they had shared with her, ordinary exchanges that now seemed prophetic, imbued with subtle signs they had overlooked. Friends and neighbors, revisiting memories with fresh eyes, began to question the familiar, the routine, the ordinary interactions that had masked a deliberate pattern of predation. The psychological weight was immense, grief and horror intertwined with the desperate relief of knowing the truth. Yet the shadow of doubt lingered, haunting every corner of the town. Meanwhile, detectives dug deeper into the suspect's past. The confession hinted at planning beyond Emily's disappearance. Previously unnoticed patterns, locations frequented, interactions studied, surveillance footage, digital footprints, and forensic evidence began to paint a broader, more unsettling picture. The suspect had exploited routine, knowledge of social patterns, and the inherent trust of a small community to execute his plan with surgical precision. Every familiar street, every casual greeting suddenly seemed like a potential part of a larger, meticulously orchestrated operation. The realization sent waves of unease through the investigative team, reinforcing the notion that evil often hides in plain sight, wrapped in ordinary gestures and trusted faces. As Part 5 progressed, the forensic breakthroughs revealed startling new connections. Items recovered years earlier, a piece of fabric, a smudged fingerprint, a partial shoe print, were reanalyzed with modern technology. The results were irrefutable. Links between the suspect and locations tied to Emily's disappearance confirmed, corroborating his confession in ways previously unimaginable. Detectives walked the familiar terrain of the railroad tracks, now armed with the certainty that the suspect had been meticulous, calculated, and disturbingly aware of how to manipulate perceptions. The tracks themselves, silent witnesses to the crime, seemed to vibrate with the tension of unresolved years. The memory of Emily's absence etched into every rail, every grain of dirt, every rusted fence post. Community tension escalated as details became public. Conversations that had once been whispered grew louder, neighbors speculating about what signs had been missed, what interactions had masked the truth, who had known, and who had looked away. Social gatherings carried an undercurrent of caution. Everyday interactions were filtered through a lens of suspicion. Even children asking simple questions about Emily were met with careful, guarded responses. The town had been irrevocably altered, its rhythm reshaped by fear, revelation, and the stark reminder that evil can hide behind familiar faces. Every familiar corner, every quiet street, now carried an invisible weight of observation and reflection. The suspect's trial reached a pivotal moment when forensic evidence was presented in painstaking detail. DNA traces, fiber matches, and digital logs were meticulously displayed, illustrating the precision and forethought behind Emily's disappearance. Witnesses were called to contextualize small but critical actions, reconstructing the sequence of events that had confounded investigators for years. The courtroom atmosphere was electric, each revelation sending shivers through the attendees, a collective shudder of disbelief, horror, and the thin, brittle satisfaction of justice emerging after prolonged uncertainty. Families held one another, eyes fixed, hearts pounding, as each piece of the puzzle clicked into place with unnerving clarity. Even as justice approached a tangible resolution, emotional wounds remained raw. The town grappled with the duality of closure and trauma. Parents clutched children a little tighter, friends exchanged glances loaded with unspoken concern. Daily routines were punctuated by heightened awareness, small interactions scrutinized with suspicion. The collective memory of Emily's disappearance became a permanent lens through which the town experienced ordinary life. Every echo of her absence, every trace of the past, was a reminder of the fragility of safety and the persistence of memory. Communities are often resilient, but the town had been forced to absorb a trauma that refused to dissipate. Then came the most shocking revelation. As investigators cross-referenced old interviews with digital enhancements and forensic findings, a previously overlooked connection emerged. A second individual, once considered peripheral, appeared in multiple data points, their presence subtle but undeniable. Surveillance footage, phone records, and witness statements intersected in a way that suggested complicity. The community reeled at the possibility that the story was even more complex than initially revealed. What had seemed like a single thread now unraveled into a tapestry of manipulation, deceit, and premeditation. The emotional and psychological stakes intensified, reminding everyone that even solved cases can harbor hidden truths. Emily's parents faced a renewed wave of emotion. The confirmation of a potential accomplice both terrified and vindicated them. Their grief, once channeled toward closure, now extended into a labyrinth of new questions. Friends and neighbors, too, wrestled with the implications. Conversations revisited interactions from years past, small details reevaluated, and the very notion of trust in everyday life was challenged. The town existed in a dual reality: the tangible progression of legal justice and the intangible persistence of psychological tension. Each revelation reshaped memory, perception, and the collective emotional landscape. Detectives responded swiftly, following every lead, cross-examining all evidence, and ensuring that the new revelation did not derail the pursuit of justice. The suspect's meticulous planning now appeared even more elaborate, his network of manipulations extending further than originally imagined. Every digital trace, every minute behavioral cue was scrutinized under the harsh light of forensic science. Investigators felt a mixture of awe, horror, and resolve, understanding that uncovering the full truth required relentless diligence and unwavering focus. Emily's disappearance, once an isolated cold case, now became a case study in human deception, the fragility of routine, and the unpredictable endurance of memory. The town itself became a crucible of emotion and reflection. Streets, cafes, and schools carried the invisible weight of Emily's story. Residents walked with heightened caution, their interactions filtered through awareness shaped by fear, grief, and a quest for understanding. Social rituals, gatherings, school events, community meetings were now tinged with vigilance. Conversations included implicit checks for consistency, observations of behavior, and the quiet recognition that safety is never guaranteed. Even as the legal process moved toward conclusion, the psychological impact remained pervasive, shaping collective behavior and communal consciousness. Forensic teams, detectives, and legal experts collaborated with renewed intensity. The goal was comprehensive closure, not only through conviction, but through exhaustive exploration of every detail. Witness testimonies were revisited, timelines reconstructed, and cross-references verified with painstaking precision. Each piece of evidence, each confession, each subtle anomaly was examined and contextualized. The unfolding narrative revealed a chilling portrait of manipulation, predation, and exploitation of trust. The town's residents absorbed the revelations in quiet disbelief, the emotional gravity echoing through homes, workplaces, and schools. As Part 5 draws toward its close, the story of Emily Hart emerges as both resolved and hauntingly incomplete. The primary suspect's actions are documented, confessions verified, and forensic links confirmed. Yet the shadow of potential complicity, the subtle presence of overlooked connections, and the lingering psychological impact on the community remain potent. Emily's absence continues to echo through memories, conversations, and the fabric of daily life. The cold case, once dormant, now embodies the duality of closure and the enduring tension of unresolved nuances. The town, forever altered, navigates a landscape of vigilance, grief, and reflection, carrying forward a story that continues to shape perception, trust, and the haunting resonance of absence. The investigation refused to rest, as if the case itself demanded one final reckoning. Every thread from the past was pulled taut, every shadow examined under a new, unforgiving light. Detectives, armed with modern forensic tools and years of painstaking review, began tracing subtle inconsistencies in the suspect's account. Each minor detail, an overlooked phone call, a stray footprint, a faint scent recorded in old evidence logs, was now analyzed with surgical precision. The rhythm of the investigation quickened, driven by the urgency of uncovering the full truth. The town, still raw from the shock of the confession and the revelation of potential accomplices, watched silently. Collective breaths held, waiting for the next tremor. Emily's parents returned to the tracks where her car had been abandoned all those years ago. The railroad, rusted and silent, seemed to hold a secret only time had revealed. Her mother ran her fingers along the jagged metal rails, tracing the path she imagined Emily had taken that night. The cold and wet ground beneath her shoes bringing memories flooding back. Her father knelt, examining the disturbed earth, as if it might whisper the answers they had sought for nearly a decade. Every small detail of the terrain, every pebble, every scuff, became imbued with significance. The tracks had been witnesses, silent but relentless, to a series of events meticulously orchestrated, events that had left an entire community suspended between memory and horror. The suspect's calm demeanor in court belied the storm brewing beneath the surface. As evidence mounted, his story began to unravel. Detectives noticed subtle contradictions, minute hesitations, a flicker of recognition when pressed on specific dates and locations. Each reaction was catalogued, cross-referenced, and analyzed. The psychological portrait emerging was more chilling than ever, a man not merely capable of violence, but of anticipating every move, every scrutiny, every attempt to catch him. His planning had been meticulous, exploiting familiarity and routine to mask intent. And yet, for all his careful manipulation, the relentless pursuit of truth began to chip away at the facade he had maintained for nearly a decade. Then came the twist no one had anticipated. Digital forensic experts, re-examining old cell phone records and cross-referencing them with traffic cameras, discovered a movement pattern that placed a second, previously unidentified individual at the scene multiple times in the days leading up to Emily's disappearance. The town's collective shock returned with renewed intensity. Conversations that had once speculated on a lone perpetrator now grappled with the unsettling reality that another hand had been involved, a collaborator concealed in plain sight for years. Detectives, lawyers, and families alike were forced to reimagine the narrative, the previously simple timeline now fragmented, jagged, and complex. Emily's friends were called in for additional interviews. Every detail of their last encounters with her, previously considered minor, was revisited. A brief meeting at a cafe, a ride home from work, a casual text message, all were analyzed with meticulous scrutiny. Each interaction, mundane at the time, now took on a weight previously unimaginable. The community's collective memory became a tool of investigation. What had been overlooked for years now revealed subtle patterns, breadcrumbs that led to the deeper, more horrifying truth. The sense of betrayal, already acute, intensified. Someone close, familiar, trusted, may have played a hidden role in orchestrating events that had so devastated the town. Investigators focused on the newly identified suspect. Background checks, phone records, financial trails, and social interactions were traced in excruciating detail. Every connection, no matter how tenuous, was examined, revealing a pattern of association with the original suspect that suggested deliberate collusion. The psychological complexity of the crime deepened. Emily's disappearance was not merely the product of one mind, but of coordination, manipulation, and calculated planning. The town, already unsettled, now faced the terrifying realization that the horror had been a cooperative act, executed with a precision that had eluded detection for years. The courtroom, already tense, shifted under the weight of these revelations. The legal strategy had to adapt in real time. Prosecutors introduced the new findings, presenting forensic evidence, witness accounts, and digital traces linking the second individual to key locations and events. Murmurs rippled through the gallery as connections emerged, some subtle, others undeniable. The narrative of Emily's disappearance, once linear, now expanded, multidimensional, revealing the depths of planning and deception that had taken place under the eyes of the unsuspecting town. Families and neighbors watched in silent horror, realizing that the story they thought they knew was only partially true. Emily's parents were devastated by the revelation, yet clung to a fragile hope that uncovering the full truth could prevent similar tragedies. Each new discovery was both a wound and a key, confirming what had happened, while simultaneously opening doors to more questions. Friends and community members processed the information with quiet dread. Daily life was reframed, viewed through the lens of heightened awareness, vigilance, and skepticism. Familiar places and routines now carried a weight of significance, subtle and omnipresent. Trust, once presumed, became conditional, measured, and fragile. The town collectively absorbed the revelation with a mixture of grief, horror, and resolve. understanding that Emily's absence had forever altered their perception of safety and familiarity. Detectives revisited the physical evidence with renewed focus. The tracks, the forested edges, discarded items, and overlooked clues were analyzed with cutting-edge forensic techniques. Every fingerprint, fiber, and soil sample was cross-referenced with the expanded suspect pool. Advanced software reconstructed movement patterns, creating a visual representation of the coordinated manipulation that had allowed Emily's disappearance to go undetected. The picture was chillingly precise, revealing gaps in vigilance, overlooked signals, and the meticulous patience of the perpetrators. Forensic breakthroughs illuminated what had been invisible to the human eye, confirming both the original suspect's confession and the involvement of an accomplice whose presence had remained hidden for years. The town, aware of the renewed revelations, oscillated between fear and fascination. Community meetings, informal gatherings, and neighborhood conversations centered on the implications of the expanded investigation. Parents became more vigilant, residents discussed safety protocols, and social interactions were scrutinized with an intensity that reflected the town's enduring trauma. Emily's story, though partially resolved, had embedded itself in the collective consciousness, shaping perception, behavior, and emotional response. Every detail of daily life became a potential cautionary tale, a reminder that ordinary interactions could conceal extraordinary danger. The trial adapted to incorporate these developments. Legal teams faced the challenge of presenting an increasingly complex narrative to a jury, ensuring that each link, each piece of evidence, each forensic connection was comprehensible and compelling. Witnesses testified anew, timelines were reconstructed, and the emotional weight of nearly a decade of uncertainty permeated every exchange. The courtroom became a theater of tension, each revelation amplifying the psychological stakes. Families, detectives, and the town itself bore witness not only to justice, but to the unfolding of a truth long concealed, a truth that demanded attention, acknowledgement, and reckoning. Even with a verdict approaching, the community remained unsettled. Conversations in homes, cafes, and streets reflected the duality of closure and unease. Parents monitored interactions more closely. Friends analyzed behavior with subtle vigilance, and every routine was approached with heightened awareness. The town's collective consciousness had been irrevocably altered, shaped by years of uncertainty, revelation, and the haunting presence of Emily's absence. Though justice was being served, the psychological impact of the crime lingered, a silent, pervasive reminder that some shadows remain even when the surface is illuminated. The final forensic evidence cemented the narrative. Digital records, combined with physical traces and witness accounts, confirmed the coordinated involvement of both the primary suspect and the accomplice. The timeline, once fragmented, now presented a coherent, chilling picture of premeditation, manipulation, and calculated execution. Emily's disappearance, previously a solitary act of evil, had been part of a broader orchestration that had relied on trust, routine, and meticulous planning to remain hidden. The revelations stunned not only the town, but law enforcement, demonstrating the enduring complexity of human behavior and the persistence of hidden malevolence. Emily's parents, though devastated by the breadth of deception, felt a cautious relief that the full scope of the crime was finally emerging. The courtroom, the forensic labs, and the town itself were now aligned in understanding the magnitude of what had occurred. Yet the emotional weight remained, heavy and pervasive, a reminder that some wounds do not fully heal even when justice is served. Memories of Emily, once quiet and private, now echoed publicly through conversations, memorials, and collective reflection, a testament to both her life and the enduring impact of her absence. As Part 6 concludes, the story reaches a pivotal intersection of revelation and reflection. Emily Hart's disappearance, long shrouded in uncertainty, is now illuminated by confession, forensic breakthroughs, and the revelation of an accomplice. The town grapples with closure and the persistent shadow of trauma, understanding that the truth, however complete, leaves indelible marks on memory, behavior, and trust. The cold case, once dormant, now serves as both resolution and haunting reminder that the ordinary can conceal extraordinary danger, that vigilance is eternal, and that the echoes of absence resonate long after justice is rendered. The town felt suspended in a peculiar, tense liminality. Days blurred into nights, yet the echoes of Emily Hart's absence reverberated through every street, every home, every interaction. Even those who had never met her felt the weight of the story, the quiet horror of knowing that evil could operate undetected, patiently and ruthlessly within their midst. Parents held children a little closer, strangers were scrutinized with subtle wariness, and the ordinary rhythms of life were punctuated with the haunting awareness that trust could be a dangerous assumption. The community had survived shock once, and now it confronted the compounded realization of betrayal, manipulation, and carefully hidden malice. Emily's parents, navigating grief that had never fully abated, now faced the psychological weight of knowing the full extent of deception. The revelation of a second perpetrator compounded their sorrow, layering trauma upon years of uncertainty. Each detail they learned reopened memories they had painstakingly reconstructed, forcing them to walk again through the nights of her disappearance, the days of waiting, and the years of silent despair. Friends who had once offered consolation now engaged in cautious conversations, aware that even the smallest oversight could trigger renewed anguish. The town became a landscape of quiet vigilance, the emotional undercurrent thick, persistent, and unavoidable. Detectives, too, felt the cumulative weight of the case. Years of investigation, painstaking analysis, and meticulous review had culminated in an unexpected, almost cinematic revelation. Each forensic breakthrough, each confession, each digital trace carried its own gravity. They walked the streets with measured steps, aware that the ordinary environment, familiar as it once seemed, had been the stage for a prolonged, calculated act of cruelty. Their understanding of human behavior deepened, as did their sense of responsibility. Every subtle pattern, every overlooked clue, every missed signal became a teaching point, a stark reminder that patience and vigilance are indispensable in the pursuit of truth. Community meetings, once focused on ordinary town concerns, now carried the undercurrent of collective trauma. Residents gathered in libraries, community halls, and cafes to share recollections, observations, and questions. Conversations were punctuated with caution, memory, and the unspoken acknowledgement that life had been irrevocably altered. Every recollection of Emily, her laughter, her gestures, her routines, was filtered through the lens of tragedy and revelation. The ordinary fabric of communal life was now interwoven with grief, awareness, and a lingering sense of the precariousness of safety. The town, though resilient, carried the scars of uncertainty and betrayal. The suspect's psychological profile became a focal point for forensic experts, criminologists, and community members alike. Analysts examined patterns of manipulation, prediction, and patience that allowed him to execute his plan with almost surgical precision. Behavioral cues, interpersonal interactions, and subtle predatory tactics were cataloged and studied, revealing a mind attuned to control, observation, and deception. The public absorbed these insights with a mixture of horror and fascination. Conversations shifted from conjecture about the crime to reflections on human behavior, the capacity for hidden malice, and the fragility of trust. Emily's disappearance, once a local tragedy, now became a case study in the mechanics of manipulation and the enduring power of vigilance. Memorials for Emily became more than simple acts of remembrance. They were collective expressions of grief, reflection, and determination. Candles flickered in the night near the tracks, flowers were placed at the locations she had frequented, and photographs captured the essence of a life interrupted. The town embraced rituals of acknowledgement, creating a shared narrative that both honored her and served as a reminder of lessons learned. Residents found solace in communal reflection, in shared grief, and in the understanding that while absence could not be reversed, memory and vigilance could ensure that her story continued to influence, caution, and resonate. Even as the trial approached its climax, the community's psychological landscape remained tense, layered with anticipation, dread, and the subtle relief of partial resolution. The courtroom became a theater of emotion, where legal proceedings intersected with raw human experience. Witnesses recounted interactions with Emily, analysts presented forensic revelations, and lawyers navigated a complex web of evidence and testimony. Every statement carried weight, every reaction was scrutinized, and the collective audience absorbed the intensity, suspended in the delicate balance between closure and the persistent shadow of trauma. The discovery of an accomplice introduced new ethical and emotional considerations. Families grappled with questions of responsibility, complicity, and moral judgment. The town, already fractured by fear and revelation, now faced the challenge of integrating this knowledge into everyday life. Conversations in homes, schools, and workplaces reflected the duality of human response, fascination with the unfolding truth, and the lingering discomfort of betrayal. Daily life became a careful navigation of awareness, reflection, and the psychological impact of knowing that evil had been deliberate, calculated, and sustained over years. Digital reconstructions of Emily's final movements brought a stark clarity to the events. Forensic teams combined cell phone logs, traffic camera footage, and witness accounts to create a visual timeline that traced her steps with chilling precision. Each frame, each movement revealed the careful orchestration of the perpetrators, the predictability they had exploited, and the subtle cues that had gone unnoticed for years. The visualization was both illuminating and horrifying. The town, watching these reconstructions, felt a renewed tension, as familiar streets and locations were reframed as sites of vulnerability, observation, and long-hidden malice. The legal proceedings intensified as the court considered both perpetrators. Evidence, testimony, and forensic reconstructions coalesced into a narrative that was both cohesive and devastating. The judge, jury, and attendees absorbed the details with profound attention, understanding that the story extended beyond the courtroom into the daily lives and consciousness of an entire town. Every revelation amplified the stakes, psychological, emotional, and moral. Justice was not merely a matter of verdicts, but of reckoning with a complex web of manipulation, planning, and the enduring impact of absence. Emily's parents, standing together through these proceedings, found a bittersweet balance between grief and a sense of mission. While closure remained elusive in many ways, the unveiling of truth provided a framework for understanding, for reflection, and for communal processing. Friends, neighbors, and residents participated in collective rituals of acknowledgement, reinforcing the town's shared narrative and the memory of a life cut short. Candles, photographs, quiet conversations, all became vehicles for processing trauma, honoring memory, and reinforcing vigilance. The community, though scarred, demonstrated resilience through shared recognition of both horror and survival. The town's daily routines were subtly but permanently reshaped. Streets, once familiar and neutral, now carried a charged significance. Parents guided children along paths with increased awareness, neighbors exchanged subtle observations, and public spaces were navigated with a careful attention to detail. The psychological imprint of Emily's disappearance and the revelations surrounding it permeated every interaction. The community learned to coexist with the knowledge that evil can be patient, deliberate, and nearly invisible, and that the lessons of the past are essential to shaping present awareness. Detectives, forensic analysts, and legal teams worked tirelessly to ensure that every aspect of the case was addressed. Each minor anomaly, previously overlooked detail, and lingering question was meticulously examined. The dual perpetrators' patterns were reconstructed, understood, and presented with precision. Emily's final hours, once shrouded in mystery, were rendered with a clarity that combined scientific rigor, psychological insight, and painstaking narrative reconstruction. The town absorbed these revelations collectively, the tension between closure and lingering unease persisting, shaping perceptions and emotional responses across generations. As Part 7 draws to its conclusion, the town stands transformed. Emily Hart's story, once a cold, unsolved case, now serves as both resolution and haunting reminder. The perpetrators have been identified, evidence meticulously documented, and justice pursued with relentless determination. Yet the emotional, psychological, and communal impact persists, infusing every conversation, routine, and memory with a quiet tension. The town exists in a state of heightened awareness, simultaneously honoring the past, processing trauma, and navigating the fragile boundaries between trust, safety, and vigilance. Emily's absence resonates, an enduring presence in the consciousness of all who lived through the story. The courtroom was thick with anticipation, an almost tangible tension pressing down on every person present. Every eye followed the unfolding drama, every ear strained to catch the nuances of testimony, and every heart seemed suspended, waiting for the next revelation. Detectives, forensic experts, and legal teams moved through the proceedings with precision, aware that years of painstaking investigation were reaching a critical junction. Emily Hart's story, long dormant, now demanded final reckoning. The town itself seemed to hold its collective breath, aware that the truth, fully revealed, would forever alter perceptions, relationships, and trust. Emily's parents sat together, hands clasped, knuckles white, hearts heavy with emotion. Each piece of evidence presented was a dual-edged sword, confirmation of what had occurred, yet an unrelenting reminder of absence and betrayal. Their grief had been layered over years of uncertainty, amplified by revelations of meticulous planning, manipulation, and the existence of a second perpetrator. Every forensic diagram, every photograph, every reconstructed movement sequence brought clarity, but also reopening of wounds they had struggled to heal. Friends and neighbors watched silently, some with tears, some with faces etched in disbelief, all processing a story that had become part of the town's very fabric. The digital reconstructions played on large screens, tracing Emily's last hours with forensic precision. Footsteps, GPS signals, phone records, and witness accounts coalesced into a visual narrative of deliberate orchestration. Each frame revealed patterns that had eluded detection for years, exposing the precision with which the perpetrators manipulated perception, exploited trust, and concealed their actions. The room was silent, every observer transfixed, some recoiling, some leaning forward, grappling with the reality that the ordinary streets of their town had been the stage for such calculated horror. The sequence of events, once mysterious, now revealed the terrifying foresight and patience of minds attuned to exploitation. Outside the courthouse, the town buzzed with anxious energy. Reporters jostled for positions, cameras flashed in relentless bursts, and residents gathered, discussing every word, gesture, and detail that emerged. Streets and homes, once ordinary, were now haunted by memory and anticipation. Parents walked children with heightened vigilance, neighbors exchanged cautious glances, and conversations carried the undercurrent of fear mixed with fascination. Emily's disappearance, though legally nearing resolution, had fundamentally reshaped the communal psyche. Awareness of vulnerability, of the subtle signs of manipulation, permeated daily life, leaving no aspect untouched by the long shadow of the crime. The revelation of the second perpetrator's role sent shockwaves through the courtroom and the town alike. Digital evidence, cross-referenced with witness testimony and physical traces, proved the accomplice's presence, coordination, and deliberate involvement. The complexity of the crime intensified. A single act of disappearance now appeared as a carefully executed plan involving calculation, collaboration, and subtle manipulation. The community reeled, struggling to reconcile the ordinary, familiar environment with the extraordinary orchestration of malice that had unfolded unnoticed. Questions of trust, complicity, and moral responsibility infiltrated daily life, conversations, and personal reflection. Emily's parents, absorbing this revelation, felt the duality of relief and renewed grief. Understanding the scope of the crime brought clarity, but also reopened emotional wounds. Friends, neighbors, and the broader community reflected on interactions that now took on new significance. Simple exchanges, everyday routines, and ordinary gestures were scrutinized with the hindsight of knowledge. The town's collective consciousness became a repository of memory, reflection, and vigilance, informed by the stark realization that deception and manipulation can operate invisibly within familiar environments. Detectives, forensic analysts, and legal experts intensified their work. Each minor inconsistency, overlooked detail, and lingering question was meticulously re-examined. Movement patterns, communications, and behavioral cues of both perpetrators were reconstructed with cutting-edge technology. The orchestration that had allowed Emily's disappearance to remain unsolved for years was now fully illuminated. The town, absorbing this revelation, felt the weight of the extraordinary patience and calculated precision that had masked the crime. Awareness, fear, and fascination intertwined, forming a collective consciousness acutely sensitive to the subtleties of human behavior and hidden intent. The courtroom reached its emotional zenith as witness after witness detailed interactions, observations, and minor anomalies that, in retrospect, revealed the careful orchestration of events. Every testimony, every forensic presentation, every reconstructed timeline intensified the psychological weight. The jurors, families, and community members experienced a duality of emotions: relief that justice was unfolding, horror at the scale of manipulation, and an enduring unease that the ordinary world could conceal extraordinary evil. Each detail amplified the tension, a relentless cadence of revelation, confirmation, and reflection that left observers on edge, hearts racing, minds alert. Memorials for Emily became spaces of reflection and resilience. Candles flickered along the tracks where she had last been seen, flowers and photographs marked locations of significance, and quiet gatherings allowed the town to process grief collectively. These acts, though small, were profound: acknowledgement of trauma, affirmation of memory, and assertion of communal vigilance. Residents drew strength from shared reflection, understanding that while absence could not be undone, awareness, remembrance, and collective memory could serve as both tribute and protection. Emily's presence, though absent, became woven into the town's identity, a constant reminder of vigilance, trust, and resilience. The psychological impact extended beyond memorials. Parents, educators, and community leaders integrated lessons from the case into daily life, emphasizing awareness, observation, and proactive safety measures. Conversations in schools, homes, and public spaces incorporated discussions about subtle cues, behavioral patterns, and the importance of vigilance without paranoia. The town navigated a new normal, informed by the profound understanding that ordinary life can conceal extraordinary malice. Emily's story, though tragic, became both cautionary tale and collective lesson, shaping behavior and perception for years to come. As the trial approached its conclusion, the evidence against both perpetrators was irrefutable. DNA, digital footprints, witness testimony, and forensic reconstructions converged into a coherent, chilling narrative of premeditated collaboration. The courtroom, filled with families, investigators, and residents, absorbed each revelation with heightened emotion. The tension was relentless, the psychological stakes profound, and the communal focus unwavering. Justice was not merely procedural, it was a collective reckoning with the depth of deception, manipulation, and the enduring impact of absence on a community. The judge's summation was measured but powerful, articulating the gravity of the crime, the meticulous planning, and the psychological impact on the town. Each word echoed through the courtroom, a resonance of authority, acknowledgement, and moral clarity. The jurors, families, and community members were attuned, absorbing the weight of both evidence and emotional testimony. The courtroom became a crucible of reflection, grief, and tentative closure, where the boundaries between legal process and human experience converged in an extraordinary display of narrative and consequence. Emily's parents, sitting together, experienced a complex interplay of relief, sorrow, and residual anxiety. The confirmation of full culpability provided a measure of clarity, yet the emotional and psychological ramifications of nearly a decade of uncertainty could not be erased. Friends and neighbors, reflecting on the revelations, engaged in discussions marked by empathy, vigilance, and the recognition of shared trauma. The town collectively processed the intricate tapestry of events, balancing closure with the enduring awareness that life, safety, and trust can be fragile, mutable, and easily manipulated. The digital reconstructions, forensic reports, and witness narratives combine to present an unflinching depiction of Emily's final movements and the calculated orchestration of the perpetrators. Streets, neighborhoods, and familiar environments were transformed through this understanding, imbued with a charged significance that altered perception. Residents walked familiar routes with a new consciousness, children were guided with heightened awareness, and daily routines carried an undercurrent of reflection and vigilance. The town, though striving for normalcy, existed in a state of heightened awareness, informed by the enduring lessons of the cold case. As Part 8 draws to its climax, the story reaches both revelation and reflection. Emily Hart's disappearance, once an unresolved cold case, is now illuminated with precision, clarity, and a chilling understanding of the perpetrator's collaboration. The town confronts closure intertwined with persistent unease, navigating a landscape shaped by trauma, resilience, and collective vigilance. Emily's absence continues to resonate, her story embedded in the consciousness of a community forever altered, serving as both memorial and lesson, a testament to the enduring impact of truth, memory, and the shadows that lurk within the ordinary. The verdict day arrived with a tension so thick it seemed to press down on the town itself. Inside the courtroom, every seat was filled, every eye fixed on the proceedings. Emily's parents sat at the front, shoulders tense, hands tightly clasped, knuckles white, hearts hammering in a rhythm that echoed the collective pulse of the room. The jurors entered, faces unreadable, carrying the weight of years of deliberation compressed into a single decisive moment. The suspects sat across the aisle, their composure strained, subtle tremors betraying a consciousness that the long shadow of their actions was finally closing in. Outside, the streets were silent but for whispers, camera flashes, and murmurs of anticipation, a town collectively holding its breath. The judge's voice, steady and solemn, filled the chamber as she read the verdict. The words hung in the air, reverberating off walls, seeping into every corner, every mind present. Guilty, guilty on all counts. Relief surged through Emily's parents, sharp and sudden, cutting through years of grief and uncertainty. Tears streaked faces in the courtroom, quiet sobs mingling with gasps, expressions of disbelief, and the raw intensity of long-delayed justice. Friends, neighbors, and investigators absorbed the culmination of nearly 2 decades of uncertainty, relief, and horror intertwined. Justice had been served, yet the emotional and psychological echoes of the crime remained, pervasive and unrelenting. Outside the courthouse, the community reacted in waves. People gathered in small groups, exchanging quiet congratulations, empathetic embraces, and reflective silence. Conversations revolved around disbelief, astonishment at the meticulous orchestration of the crime, and awe at the persistence of law enforcement and forensic teams who had refused to let the case remain unresolved. Parents held children closer, strangers passed with subtle acknowledgement, and the town's rhythm, though slowly returning to routine, remained punctuated by the collective memory of absence, danger, and vulnerability. The ordinary streets, once neutral, were now imbued with heightened awareness. Emily's parents, still processing the weight of the verdict, navigated a complex storm of emotion. Relief was tempered by grief, closure by the haunting recollection of years spent in uncertainty. Friends and family offered support, yet the emotional terrain remained treacherous, the psychological impact of lost time and the revelation of an accomplice layering trauma upon grief. Every memory of Emily, her laughter, gestures, routines, was now filtered through understanding, awareness, and the lingering weight of manipulation she had endured. The town's collective consciousness absorbed the story in layers, each layer a combination of sorrow, reflection, and a hard-earned vigilance. The investigators and forensic teams, having worked for years to reconstruct the narrative, now documented the final steps of the case with meticulous care. Every footprint, fiber, fingerprint, and digital trail was cataloged, forming an irrefutable record of the crime. Behavioral analysis detailed the methodical manipulation executed by both perpetrators, the exploitation of trust, routine, and environmental familiarity. the psychological study of the suspects became a reference for future cases, a chilling reminder of the sophistication possible in coordinated predation. The town absorbed this with awe and unease, understanding that the extraordinary patience and planning that had concealed the crime could exist anywhere, unnoticed. Memorials for Emily intensified in the aftermath of the verdict. The tracks, once silent witnesses, were adorned with candles, flowers, and photographs, each gesture a declaration of remembrance and collective resilience. Residents participated in ceremonies of reflection, honoring her life while acknowledging the trauma that had rippled through the community. Conversations in cafes, schools, and workplaces were suffused with awareness, the memory of Emily shaping interactions, vigilance, and collective understanding. The ordinary had been forever altered, marked by the understanding that absence carries a persistent presence and that safety, while restored legally, remains fragile in perception. The town began a slow process of adaptation. Parents guided children with new attentiveness. Neighbors observed one another with subtle vigilance, and daily routines were infused with the consciousness of what had transpired. Ordinary locations, parks, streets, schools, were reconsidered under the lens of awareness. Conversations carried layers of insight, reflection, and subtle precaution. The psychological imprint of the crime persisted, shaping the collective behavior, decisions, and interactions of a community that had been profoundly altered. Emily's story had become both cautionary tale and source of communal resilience, instructing vigilance without engendering paranoia, reflection without hopelessness. Legal proceedings continued for the accomplice, whose presence had added complexity to the investigation. Evidence meticulously reconstructed, testimony cross-referenced, and digital timelines confirmed involvement, coordination, and premeditation. The court meticulously examined the collaboration, ensuring that the scope of culpability was fully acknowledged. The town, once again, felt the tension of anticipation, aware that each new revelation was a further brushstroke in a narrative that had spanned decades. The duality of closure and persistent unease maintained its grip, coloring interactions, memories, and reflections across the community. Emily's parents navigated the emotional landscape with resilience that belied their profound grief. Every revelation, every confirmation, every corroboration of evidence was both painful and illuminating. Their understanding of the events, long obscured by uncertainty, was now precise, yet this precision did not erase the emotional trauma. Friends, neighbors, and community members offered support, sharing in reflection, memory, and vigilance. The town collectively processed the enduring presence of Emily's absence, acknowledging both the completion of justice and the persistence of psychological resonance that lingered in homes, streets, and public spaces alike. The forensic reconstructions, combined with witness narratives and digital evidence, created a chillingly detailed timeline of Emily's final hours. Streets, homes, and familiar locations were recontextualized, imbued with significance that altered the perception of safety. Every step, every interaction, every deviation from routine became part of a coherent, horrifying sequence that demonstrated the precision, patience, and calculated execution of both perpetrators. The town absorbed this reconstruction collectively, understanding the gravity of premeditation, the subtlety of manipulation, and the enduring importance of awareness and vigilance. Community initiatives emerged in response to the revelations. Schools incorporated lessons about observation, awareness, and safety. Local organizations organized workshops on behavioral cues and situational vigilance. Families engaged in discussions designed to reinforce caution without instilling fear. Emily's story, though tragic, became a template for education, reflection, and communal resilience. Ordinary life resumed, yet it was forever altered by memory, awareness, and the shared understanding that the extraordinary can hide within the ordinary, and that vigilance is a lifelong communal responsibility. As the trial concluded, the courtroom remained charged with emotion. Legal closure, achieved through meticulous evidence and testimony, intersected with profound psychological closure that remained incomplete. Emily's parents, friends, and neighbors experienced a complex interplay of relief, grief, and enduring unease. The town, having navigated nearly 2 decades of suspense, investigation, revelation, and trauma, stood at a threshold, a moment between past horror and future vigilance, a space where memory and presence coexisted with absence and awareness. The cold case, once dormant, now held dual significance, a narrative of justice and a persistent echo of trauma that shaped perception, behavior, and communal consciousness. Even after the verdicts were rendered, the community remained acutely aware of the lingering psychological impact. Parents, neighbors, and friends maintained heightened vigilance, their behaviors subtly altered by memory and reflection. Conversations carried an undertone of awareness, caution, and shared understanding. Emily's absence, though legally addressed, continued to resonate, a pervasive presence in both memory and daily life. The town navigated the delicate balance between justice, grief, and vigilance, understanding that while legal resolution marks an endpoint in procedure, the human consciousness and communal psyche retain the indelible imprint of extraordinary events. The closure of Part 9 leaves the town in a state of solemn reflection. Emily Hart's disappearance, once a cold, unresolved case, has now reached its legal conclusion, perpetrators identified and judged, evidence documented and analyzed. Yet the emotional, psychological, and social reverberations persist, shaping interactions, awareness, and communal memory. The story, though concluded in procedure, continues to unfold in memory, reflection, and vigilance, a constant reminder that absence, trauma, and the subtle mechanisms of deception leave indelible marks on both individuals and the collective consciousness. Even as the courtroom emptied and the verdicts were etched into official record, the town remained suspended in a state of heightened awareness, a delicate tension that lingered like fog over streets, homes, and familiar pathways. Every corner, every shadow, every seemingly innocuous interaction seemed charged with the memory of Emily Hart's disappearance. Parents guided children with careful attention, neighbors exchanged subtle nods of acknowledgement, and ordinary routines were suffused with an unspoken vigilance. The psychological landscape of the community had been irrevocably altered. Justice had been rendered, yet the echo of the crime resonated far beyond the courtroom, permeating daily life with persistent reminders of vulnerability and absence. Emily's parents returned, as they had many times before, to the tracks where her car had been abandoned. The rails, rusted and silent, bore witness to events that had remained hidden for years, now illuminated with painful clarity. Her mother traced the contours of the cold metal with trembling hands, remembering the nights of uncertainty, the agonizing waits, and the years spent imagining what could have happened. Her father knelt once more, examining the disturbed soil with meticulous attention, searching for signs that might never be found. The sight, both ordinary and extraordinary, became a locus of grief, reflection, and fragile closure, a space where memory and reality intersected in the most profound way. Detectives continued to analyze the intricate web of evidence, ensuring that every minute detail was documented, every connection verified, and every timeline reconstructed with precision. The digital reconstructions, once confined to screens and lab reports, were now archived as part of an official record, a chilling testament to the meticulous orchestration of events. The behavioral patterns of the perpetrators, their manipulations of routine and trust, were cataloged and studied, forming a psychological map that would inform future investigations and preventative strategies. The town, aware of these revelations, absorbed the implications with a mixture of horror, fascination, and renewed commitment to vigilance. Community gatherings reflected a mix of grief, reflection, and determination. Small groups met in living rooms, cafes, and libraries to discuss lessons learned, to honor Emily's memory, and to process the lingering psychological impact. Conversations were layered, cautious yet candid, interweaving personal recollections with reflections on human behavior, deception, and trust. The town collectively acknowledged the extraordinary patience and planning that had concealed the crime for years, and the painstaking efforts required to bring it to light. Emily's story became both cautionary tale and testament to resilience, shaping interactions, perceptions, and behaviors across generations. Parents, educators, and local leaders engaged in discussions about safety, observation, and community awareness. Schools integrated lessons on vigilance and behavioral cues, not as a means to instill fear, but to empower students and families with knowledge. Neighborhood watch programs gained renewed attention, informed by both the procedural resolution of the case and the psychological lessons embedded within it. The town, forever altered, navigated a new balance between vigilance and normalcy, understanding that awareness was not optional but necessary, and that the ordinary could conceal extraordinary malevolence. The dual perpetrator's incarceration marked the culmination of nearly 2 decades of uncertainty, investigation, and anticipation. Each court-mandated sentence carried not only legal weight, but a symbolic resonance for the community. The triumph of persistence, the uncovering of hidden malice, and the acknowledgement of enduring trauma. Yet, even as justice was codified in law, the emotional and psychological ramifications persisted. Emily's parents, the community, and even the investigators confronted the enduring imprint of absence, manipulation, and prolonged uncertainty. The town's collective consciousness remained deeply marked, its rhythms and interactions subtly but permanently transformed by the events that had unfolded. Memorials for Emily evolved into enduring sites of reflection and education. Candles flickered along the tracks, photographs were displayed in homes and community centers, and small plaques commemorated her life and the lessons of her disappearance. Residents participated in ceremonies that balanced grief with resolve, memory with vigilance. These acts, both private and public, became mechanisms for processing trauma, reinforcing communal resilience, and ensuring that Emily's story would continue to resonate as both tribute and cautionary narrative. The ordinary had been imbued with extraordinary significance, every interaction, every space, charged with the awareness of absence and survival. The digital and forensic reconstructions, now publicly archived, revealed the chilling precision of the perpetrator's actions. Every step Emily had taken, every moment of vulnerability exploited, every subtle manipulation executed, was meticulously documented. The visualization of her final hours, once confined to investigators and courtrooms, now served as an educational and psychological tool for the community. Streets, parks, schools, and neighborhoods were reframed through understanding, with subtle changes in routine, awareness, and precaution, reflecting lessons learned from an extraordinary and devastating series of events. Emily's parents, navigating the long aftermath of trauma, found strength in ritual, reflection, and shared memory. Every candle, every photograph, every whispered conversation was a tether to both grief and resilience. Friends and neighbors offered support, participating in acts of remembrance, reflection, and communal vigilance. The town collectively absorbed the emotional weight, understanding that while legal closure provided one form of resolution, the psychological and emotional journey was ongoing, requiring continuous attention, empathy, and care. The absence of Emily, though legally accounted for, continued to resonate, shaping perception, memory, and behavior. Detectives and investigators, having dedicated years to uncovering truth, reflected on both procedural and psychological lessons. The case revealed the capacity for meticulous planning, the exploitation of trust, and the subtle, patient manipulation that allowed a crime to remain unresolved for nearly 2 decades. Behavioral analysis, digital reconstruction, and forensic precision illuminated aspects of human behavior that were both instructive and unsettling. The town absorbed these lessons indirectly, through the procedural outcome and the collective reflection of its residents. Awareness became a shared, enduring responsibility, a means of honoring Emily's life and ensuring that vigilance persisted beyond the immediate aftermath of the crime. Even with the legal and procedural resolution, the town remained acutely aware of the enduring emotional and psychological impact. Parents, neighbors, and friends engaged in heightened vigilance, their behaviors informed by memory and reflection. Daily routines were altered subtly, with increased attention to seemingly minor details that might previously have been overlooked. The ordinary was now understood to contain extraordinary potential for harm, and awareness became both preventative and memorial. Emily's story, though concluded legally, continued to shape behavior, consciousness, and community norms, embedding itself in the fabric of daily life with a persistent, quiet intensity. As Part 10 draws to its conclusion, the town navigates the delicate balance between closure and continued awareness. Emily Hart's disappearance, long a cold case, has reached its legal and procedural endpoint, yet its emotional, psychological, and communal reverberations persist. Justice has been rendered, perpetrators held accountable, and evidence fully documented. Yet the echo of absence, the lessons of manipulation, and the enduring impact on communal consciousness remain. The town exists in a state of reflective vigilance, honoring memory while remaining acutely aware that the ordinary can conceal the extraordinary, and that the imprint of trauma, though invisible, persists indefinitely. The town, though slowly returning to its routines, remained haunted by the memory of Emily Hart. Streets that had once seemed ordinary now bore the weight of recollection, every corner a silent witness to what had transpired years before. Even the sunlight filtering through leaves carried shadows of past fear, every familiar sound tinged with the residue of uncertainty. Parents walked children along paths with subtle vigilance, neighbors exchanged glances loaded with awareness, and ordinary spaces, the park bench, the corner store, the quiet street, were infused with a charged significance. The community had survived shock, revelation, and justice, yet the echoes of absence persisted, an unrelenting reminder that the extraordinary could hide within the ordinary. Emily's parents continued their ritual visits to the tracks where her car had been abandoned. Their hands trembled over cold metal and disturbed soil, tracing lines, remembering the nights of uncertainty, the agonizing waits, the years of silent despair. Each visit was both catharsis and torment, a mixture of grief, love, and reflection. The site had become sacred ground, a nexus of memory, absence, and enduring emotional resonance. Flowers, photographs, and candles marked her presence, a visual testament to a life interrupted, a story revealed, and the vigilance the community had adopted in response. Even in absence, Emily's presence commanded attention, awareness, and reflection. Investigators and forensic analysts continued to refine their documentation, ensuring that every detail, however minor, was preserved. The digital reconstructions, cross-referenced evidence, and behavioral analysis of both perpetrators formed a chillingly comprehensive archive. These records were not merely procedural, they were educational, psychological, and communal artifacts. They revealed the patience, calculation, and precision with which the perpetrators had concealed their crime, and the extraordinary effort required to finally bring it to light. For the town, this documentation served as both warning and reassurance, a demonstration that persistence and vigilance could ultimately uncover truth, even in the darkest circumstances. The dual perpetrators, now fully incarcerated, represented both the conclusion of legal process and the tangible manifestation of accountability. Yet their presence in prison did not erase the lingering impact of their actions on the town. Conversations, reflections, and routines were forever altered by knowledge of the meticulous orchestration, the patient exploitation of trust, and the subtle manipulations that had allowed the crime to persist for nearly 2 decades. Residents navigated a new reality, one where awareness was permanently heightened, where vigilance was not optional, and where memory carried the weight of both grief and insight. Community gatherings evolved into spaces of remembrance, reflection, and collective processing. Residents gathered along the tracks in community halls and in homes, lighting candles, sharing memories, and discussing lessons learned. The act of remembering became intertwined with the act of educating, each reflection reinforcing vigilance, awareness, and communal resilience. The ordinary had been transformed into the extraordinary through the lens of memory, and the town collectively acknowledged that closure in law does not equate to the cessation of emotional, psychological, or communal impact. Digital and forensic reconstructions, once confined to courtroom screens, were now tools for understanding, vigilance, and education. Every step, every interaction, every manipulation executed by the perpetrators was meticulously documented. Streets, neighborhoods, and familiar locations were reframed through comprehension, each resident carrying a mental map of vulnerability and caution. Awareness became woven into daily routines, subtle, continuous, and pervasive, shaping behavior, conversations, and perceptions in a community acutely aware of the lingering presence of malevolence. Emily's parents, navigating the complex interplay of grief, relief, and vigilance, became pillars of reflection for the town. Their acts of remembrance, photographs, candlelight, quiet visits to the tracks, were more than private rituals. They were communal markers of memory, lessons, and emotional endurance. Friends, neighbors, and community members participated in these rituals, collectively reinforcing both grief and resilience. The ordinary landscapes of the town, infused with significance, became repositories of memory, awareness, and caution. Each street corner, each familiar location, carried the weight of narrative, history, and reflection, shaping perception and interaction for years to come. Even as the town attempted to normalize routines, the psychological imprint of the crime persisted. Parents guided children with subtle attentiveness, neighbors remained quietly observant, and ordinary spaces were traversed with heightened awareness. Conversations carried a duality of caution and memory, blending reflection with vigilance. The cold case, once unresolved, had left a permanent mark, demonstrating that even as justice is served, emotional and psychological legacies endure. Emily's absence remained a persistent presence, an invisible force shaping consciousness, perception, and behavior in subtle yet profound ways. Investigators reflected on the case with a mixture of satisfaction and lingering unease. The meticulous reconstruction of events, the behavioral profiling, and the digital mapping of movements provided a comprehensive understanding of both perpetrators' actions. Yet the psychological lessons, the patience, calculation, and subtle manipulation, served as chilling reminders of the capabilities of human malevolence. Awareness, vigilance, and persistent observation were not merely procedural. They became ethical and psychological imperatives for the community, law enforcement, and the broader society. Memorials for Emily transformed from isolated acts of grief into enduring educational and reflective practices. Schools, community centers, and neighborhoods adopted rituals and discussions designed to integrate lessons of vigilance, awareness, and understanding of human behavior. Parents guided children not with fear, but with consciousness, teaching observation, intuition, and the importance of trust balanced with caution. The town navigated a delicate equilibrium, honoring memory while cultivating resilience, ensuring that Emily's story remained present, instructive, and profoundly impactful for generations. The final legal proceedings concluded with sentences affirmed, appeals denied, and the perpetrators securely incarcerated. The closure of legal process was a milestone, yet emotional closure remained partial, layered with grief, reflection, and ongoing vigilance. Emily's parents, though burdened with the enduring pain of absence, found solace in knowing that justice had been fully pursued and that their daughter's story would persist as both memorial and lesson. Friends, neighbors, and residents embraced shared reflection, ensuring that communal consciousness absorbed both the horror and the lessons of extraordinary patience and malice. As Part 11 draws to its conclusion, the town exists in a state of reflective vigilance. Emily Hart's cold case, once a source of suspense, shock, and grief, has reached procedural closure, perpetrators held accountable, and evidence fully documented. Yet the emotional, psychological, and communal reverberations persist. Streets, homes, schools, and public spaces carry an indelible awareness, a persistent memory, and a quiet vigilance. Emily's story, though concluded legally, continues to shape consciousness, behavior, and community dynamics, an enduring presence that reminds all who dwell here that absence can speak louder than presence, that vigilance is perpetual, and that memory, trauma, and resilience are intricately intertwined in the landscape of human experience. The town, scarred yet resilient, navigates the delicate balance of memory and normalcy. Every interaction, every choice, every moment of observation is informed by lessons learned. Emily Hart's absence is both sorrow and instruction, grief and vigilance, presence and memory. The cold case, now resolved in law, continues to unfold in the psyche of the town, shaping perceptions, guiding behavior, and embedding itself into the narrative of community life. In absence, she remains profoundly present, a reminder of the fragility of safety, the precision of human malice, and the enduring power of truth, memory, and communal resilience.